Hello and welcome to Year in Review, where we recap all Nikon announcements that happened this year.
We're going to talk about things that happened, the release timeline, and maybe what's in store for the future too.
If some of you don't know us, my name is Konstantin, here's Becky. We do this little thing called Nikon Report.
Let's dive straight in, starting with the biggest news of the end of 2021, which was the first shipment of Z9 cameras.
That happened on Christmas Day. So they said they're going to release it by the end of 2021. And technically, they fulfilled their promise because the cameras were literally delivered just before Christmas and got shipped out to the customers. Some of them got them on Christmas Day, some after, someone picked them up in the shop. But it's basically happened. The camera that defined the year 2022 and got all the awards and accolades this year actually was released a couple of days before the new year.
That's right. Then, in January, we had the 400mm 2.8 TCVR lens announcement. That was our first announcement of 2022, first lens announcement of 2022, which took us all by surprise, I think.
Yeah, speaking of defining this year, was the first lens that told us this year is going to be a year for sports and wildlife photographers. Because later on, we've got announcements of 600mm, 800mm lenses, etc., etc. And I think if you look at this year in terms of lens releases, then yeah, the professional photographers who shoot this type of events, they got quite a few lenses released for them.
Lucky, lucky them. Now, to back up the professional out there photographers, we had the announcement of NX Field version 1.1. Now, this is a remote shooting system for professional photographers. So if you are one of those and you would perhaps be shooting on the side of a field or at a major event and you needed your pictures transferred to an FTP site for your press office or similar, then that was the software for you. So kudos to Nikon for supporting the pros this year.
Absolutely. It would allow you to control a bunch of cameras. I think it's up to 30 remotely through your phone or iPad and upload the images straight to the internet via FTP connection, etc., etc. Imagine World Cup and you got the cameras behind the goal, and when Messi scores a goal, then the pictures are already there on news websites for you to see. And that's pretty cool. It just again showed that Nikon cares about professional photographers, something that we enthusiasts would like to get our hands on, and maybe one day we will be able to test this bit of software. But it's amazing what they've done it. And they've done it with the news agencies as well, so they talk to actual photographers and their needs, and it's incredible what they achieved with it.
I was just going to say, one thing I did notice is that every World Cup game, the memes would come out almost immediately after a particular event happened, which means that NX Field was being put to great use there.
Thank you, NX Field, for our memes. Now, going to April, they announced 800mm f6.3 lens, which is a considerably inexpensive lens for this type of things, and it's undercut the lenses from Canon in that range as well. That was one of those lenses that became really, really popular. Nikon has 800 5.6 on f-mount, which was incredibly expensive, and this one was half the price.
We did a video on it actually, and a live stream. So we got to put it through its paces and see how it performed for bird photography. Do go check that out on our channel if you have a moment. But also in April, we had some firmware updates.
Yeah, Z9 got a firmware version 2.0, which brought quite a few features over version 1.1. And a lot of people said that technically when camera was released, a lot of features that they announced weren't available on the day one. And this version 2 brought a lot of features, not just for still photographers, but for videographers as well. And we're now on version 3.1. So we've jumped 2 generations.
Yes.
Even Z6 and Z7 Mark II are still on firmware 1.7. Z9 is on firmware version 3.1.
The Z9 gets all the love. Now, also in April, Nikon released their own CF Express cards, which are 660 gig, and they also announced the development of an MCN10 video grip and remote control.
That one is actually very interesting. Again, talking about care of professional photographers. In this case, this grip would allow you to connect it to your tripod and then via USB-C cable to your camera, and you have all the controls effectively on that grip. So instead of touching the camera, you can just do that, and it's pretty cool. That was a development announced for the grip, and then officially it was announced in November, and then we got the first shipment early in December this year.
That's right. Moving on to June, we had the announcement of the smallest camera of the year, which is the Z30. This vlogging-based camera designed for influencers and Instagrammers and content creators.
And it's the favorite camera among you professional photographers, clearly. You love this. You emailed us all those letters saying how excited you are about Z30, and we delivered. We released a bunch of videos on how to use those cameras for vlogging, for videography, etc., etc. And we've sold one or two of those as well.
Just one or two. Not as many as Z9s.
And while I'm clearly being sarcastic about the popularity of this camera among professional photographers, actually, the bunch of other people bought the camera. The reason for that being is that they are cameras that are designed for different groups of people, and it was bought by young people, it was bought by videographers as a B camera. It also was bought by people who generally just buy a camera, one camera for 5 years, and they don't really get into the system. They just buy a kit lens and they live with it. So family photographers, etc., etc. So there is a market for those cameras, and while Nikon was always saying that they're concentrating on high value, high margin products, you also need a product like this for the reasons you want to get the share, because those cameras, while selling well for this generation of people, they fund research and development of cameras like Z9.
Now moving back to professional equipment or semi-professional equipment, at the end of June, we saw the announcement of the 400 4.5, which was a little bit of a surprise because we'd already had a 400 2.8 announcement, we'd had an 800 6.3 announcement, and now we were going back to Telephoto with another 400 4.5. Quite unexpected, but a very well-received lens.
Yes, we reviewed it very recently and we found it to be very, very good. And even without a teleconverter, you don't get much image quality degradation. One of the things that we've noticed is that if you've got 500 PF lens already, then there's probably no need for update to this one. But if you don't have one already and you're looking at this range, this is definitely a good choice. Again, it's reasonably priced compared to the 2.8 version. And my hope is that maybe at some point we'll see a Z600mm, maybe f6.3 or f8 announcement, which would be a cheaper than 600mm f4 lens.
Yes, who knows? Moving on to September, we had possibly not the release of the year, but certainly one that surprised us, the 17 to 28 f2.8 Z lens.
The release of this lens sparked another conversation about using Tamron designs in the Nikon shells. So a lot of people say, well, they just rehousing the lens, etc., etc. It's not exactly the same because the lens has better weather sealants. It's got Nikon owns coating, and obviously the shell itself is slightly different as well. You get fully 100% compatibility with your Nikon equipment and also service as well as firmware support, which is really nice to have.
Precisely.
Now, what we are expecting to happen next is Nikon to release 70 to 180 f2.8 lens, which will also be a Tamron design. So that way they will complete what they call it a budget trinity of f2.8 zooms.
It's already on the roadmap, so we are expecting it to come out fairly soon. Now, fast forward a month and we got another firmware update for the Z9, which was version 3.0. This was another biggie.
Again, we talked about Z9 support by firmware. It seems like the whole Nikon development team was on Z9 this year, and that's why we didn't really see many firmware updates for other cameras, and we hope that cameras like Z6 II and Z7 Mark II will get some love at some point soon.
But I'm sure that Z9 users have been very happy considering the amount of support they've gotten this year.
And what I think they did with this firmware release is that they built a foundation for the future cameras. And obviously, Z9 brought a lot of technology, and especially the autofocus system, etc., to Nikon lineup. Now, hopefully the future cameras that we're going to talk about in another video like Z8 will get all those features, but also all that firmwares and all those video features and stills features into those cameras as well. So I personally think that while obviously they put some time and effort into this, we will start to see this trickling down in the new releases next year.
Exactly that. Now, in November, we had a whopping 3 releases in 1 month. We had the announcement of the 600 f4,
yay,
which is a pro, again, TC lens, so with a built-in teleconverter, designed for your sports and wildlife photographers primarily. We also had the official announcement of the MCN10 after its development announcement way back in April.
Yay!
And shortly after it was delivered. And we had the announcement of a black version of the ZFC.
Boo!
Along with an accompanying 40mm f Z2 special edition in the retro design to accompany the 28mm 2.8 special edition that we had with the Chrome ZFC.
Now, the reason I bought black ZFC is for a very simple reason of Nikon using this particular SKU for themselves and effectively keeping black ZFC and kits being exclusive to Nikon stores all over the world. Now, this is a particular trend that is starting to happen more and more often, and it's not just black ZFC, there's some other kits that are only available at Nikon store. For example, Z6 II with 24-120 kit, which is only available in United Kingdom at Nikon store.
And Z7 II 24-120.
And Z7 II. So this is a trend that started to happen this year. Nikon is also opening their own stores, and there's a Nikon store in China. There's also a Nikon specific store in Berlin. So what we're starting to see as dealers that Nikon is taking a few things for themselves. Now, if it's a right or wrong thing, it's for you to decide. But it seems like that next year we'll start to see more of that. And for us dealers, it's something to consider for the future.
Yeah. So this was everything that Nikon released in 2022, and quite a year it has been.
All right. So what was your favorite release, Becky?
My favorite release was actually the 800. For the simple reason, I think I had the most fun using that lens, actually, of all the lenses, because it's much longer than anything that we've really had readily available before. I've never had a chance to test out the 800 f5.6. It's a whopping great lens and hugely expensive. This suddenly made long telephoto photography very accessible to a large number of people. Obviously not everyone. It's still a big hunk of chunk of money, but it certainly made sports and wildlife photography more accessible to more photographers.
Agreed. For me, it was Z9.
Okay.
And while it was technically released just before the 2022, effectively, people received it throughout the year. And what we saw, it's not just winning all the awards and accolades for a lot of people, and not just for still photography, but for videography as well. It's effectively put Nikon on the map for not Nikon users who were always loyal to Nikon and who considered the Z system to be actually really, really good and would sell well, but also put on the map for people who were not considering Nikon brand before and were using some other brands. And I think it brought a lot of people to the system. It's not the cheapest camera, of course, but it has the technology, which is still cutting edge to this date. We all see the pre-order list. We all see that camera was out of stock pretty much till mid-October this year. Yeah, I think it's the camera that defined this year. For sure, we saw the firmware updates that Nikon spent time and effort on that. And from this point of view, I'd say, yeah, Z9 was the camera and the release of the year from Nikon.
Tell us what you thought about 2022 for Nikon. What was your favorite release? What impacted you most as a photographer this year from Nikon's selection of releases? Was it new firmware? Was it the new lenses?
I think it was a good year for Nikon.
Yeah, it was all right.
I guess. Thank you very much for watching. Give us the like and subscribe and hit that bell button. There's a super thanks button as well. And join us for our 2023 predictions video, which will be out very, very soon.
When the snowman brings the snow, well, you just might like to know. You put a great big smile upon somebody's face.